Scaling a business isn't all glossy headlines and overnight success. It's messy, it's tough, and it's full of lessons that no one warns you about. I'm Nikki Jupp, the founder of Talent Gateway, and I've helped dozens of scale-ups to hire the right teams, enabling them to grow with confidence. This is Scaling Stories Unfiltered, where founders, CEOs, and leaders share what really happens behind the scenes. No fluff, no filler, just honest conversations to help you scale smarter. So let's get into it.
We very quickly learned that an absolute superpower of being a remote first business is your ability to attract truly diverse talent. The minute you remove the constraints of you have to commute into an office in central London or wherever it is, boom, suddenly you can access all this diverse talent. So all these other businesses that lament a lot about how hard it is to recruit for diverse talent, I'm like, maybe if you had a remote first or approach, you might experience things differently.
Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tessa Clarke, the co-founder and CEO of Olio, a revolutionary food sharing app on a mission to fight food waste by connecting neighbours to share surplus food that would otherwise get thrown away. Since launching in 2015, Olio has grown into a global community of over 7 million users across 60 plus countries and recently surpassed 100 million meals shared that would have otherwise gone to waste. This tremendous impact in reducing waste and fostering a sharing economy has earned Olio recognition by the United Nations as a beacon for the world in sustainability, highlighting the platform's significance as a leader in the sharing economy movement. Before turning to entrepreneurship, Tessa built an impressive 15-year career as a digital marketing director in the corporate world. She even met her future Olio co-founder, Sasha Celestial One, while they were both pursuing their MBAs at Stanford University. The inspiration for Olio struck when Tessa was moving home and found herself with a heap of perfectly good food she couldn't bear to throw away, revealing the need for a neighbour-to-neighbour food sharing solution. Now, as the leader of one of the world's most impactful food sharing platforms, Tessa combines seasoned business savvy with a passion for sustainability and a journey that makes her an incredibly exciting guest for our podcast interview. Join me in welcoming Tessa. Let's dive in. Olio now has diverted millions of portions of food from landfills.
Yeah.
But before diving into how you achieve that, amongst other things, can you share briefly the backstory? I'm sure in every single interview you get asked this question, but I think it's important to set the scene. Not just simply, I started here, I've been there, but it's what was the vision? What was that light bulb moment? And what took you from that initial idea to where you are today?
Yeah, so I should start off by saying that I had no clue whatsoever that I would end up where I am today. I was always one of those kids who never knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I was always very envious of everyone else who seemed to know what they wanted to do. I think part of the reason why I didn't know what I wanted to do was because I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. And all I saw around me was farmers and farmers' wives. And I didn't want to be either of those. So that kind of left me a little bit stumped. I then went off essentially and just did what the system expected of me.
Yes.
I studied really hard at school. I got the jobs that society deemed would be good jobs after university. And I would say I was in a position when I was in my late 30s where I had a CV that looked really great on paper. But when I looked into my heart and my soul, I realized that if I were to die tomorrow, I wouldn't actually feel particularly proud of anything that I had achieved. So my corporate career involved me working in retail, financial services, media, general management roles, always in the digital space. Fascinating work, but not necessarily super fulfilling.
Yeah.
And that all changed. Everything got tipped on its head 10 years ago now, when I was living and working overseas and moving back to the UK And on moving day, the removal men told me I had to throw away all of our uneaten food. Now, obviously, the inner farmer's daughter in me was like, no way.
Interesting.
Definitely not chucking perfectly good food in the bin just because you've told me to. So instead, I bundled up my newborn baby and my toddler. I took them out in the depths of winter, trying to find someone to give my food to, failed miserably, cried because it was a very stressful, emotional day. Went back to my apartment, and when the removal men weren't looking, I resorted to smuggling non-perishable food in the bottom of my packing boxes. And given that I'd had a decade in the digital space at that point in time, I knew there's an app for everything. I couldn't believe there wasn't a simple app where I could advertise my food and whoever wanted it, who lived nearby, could request it and pop around and pick it up. So that was the light bulb moment for Olio. And most people I spoke to about Olio thought that I was on maternity leave at the time. So I think they thought the baby brain had gotten the better of me and perhaps I better get back to work, because this idea of an app that connects strangers to share food did not sound like a particularly promising idea. But luckily, my co-founder, Sasha, her last name is Sasha Celestial One. So that gives an indication of her upbringing. Her parents were hippies from the Midwest of the US. And like me, she pursued a very classic corporate career. But when I told her about this idea of a neighbor-to-neighbor food sharing app, and when we researched the problem of food waste and we realized just how overwhelmingly massive it was, we knew that we couldn't turn our backs on that. We knew that we had to try and play our part in solving it. And I would say that every night for the first year after launching the app, we went to bed hoping that we'd wake up in the morning to have experienced hockey stick growth. And in fact, we still go to bed hoping that tomorrow will be the day that brings us that hockey stick growth. And it's not happened yet. So it's been a bit more of a slow and steady wins the day type of story.
But your heart's in it for sure. Yes. And I guess it has to be to keep going.
It does, yes. It's true what they say. The entrepreneurial journey is a roller coaster. Yeah. It's pretty emotionally brutal, but I do feel quite fortunate in that we have such a strong mission.
Yes.
We also have incredible impact. And I'd say that they are the two things that really keep Sasha and I motivated through those dark days.
Early days, and keep chipping away, knowing that you're making meaningful difference with everything that you do. And I have to say, I am an Olio user.
Yay, love it.
And I like the fact that not only it's the food element, I like the fact now it's in your community, you can put anything on there and say, I no longer need this because somebody else can make use of it.
Someone else can make. God, you'd think that you'd written our marketing materials for us.
Yeah, know what it is. Because as your children grow, I've got 3 children now; they're young adults.
Waste-making machines, aren't they?
Yes. But I also wish that I'd have had something back then instead of having to buy brand new toys.
Yeah, exactly.
And such. Fantastic idea. Obviously, you found your partner in crime, as it were, and you're chipping away. But what was it? You've got to the point now where you've managed to raise 50 million in investment, which is a significant amount of money. And obviously there's a journey that you've been on to get there. Yeah. But before you got to what I would describe, and you might not describe it in this way, but before you got to the scaling phase, what was it that gave you that proof of concept, that moment or moments that you and Sasha says, we're definitely onto something here?
I think there've been a couple of moments. So the first one was actually before we'd even built the app. And I think this is a really important part of our journey. And it's a part of the journey that too many founders, I think, skip over, which is forcing themselves to do a low cost or no cost proof of concept before they launch anything at all. So for us, what that looked like was, first of all, we did a market research survey. So that's nice and easy. That's not the exciting bit. But what was interesting was that after we'd had the data back from the market research survey, which showed us many things, but one of the most striking things was that 1 in 3 people told us that they were physically pained throwing away food. Yes. Now, we used deliberately extreme language of physically pained to filter out false positives, because you'll get a lot of false positives on your entrepreneurial journey. People just want to be nice to you, support you. Yeah, exactly. Rather than actually tell you the truth. So that very extreme language of physically pained told us, hang on a minute, I think we might be onto something here. Then if 1 in 3 people are physically pained, but there's been no innovation since the rubbish bin, then perhaps people will be interested in our solution, an app that connects people with their neighbours to share. But before we spent all of our life savings building an app that in all probability no one would want or use. There are hundreds of millions of apps on the App Store.
Yeah.
We wanted to try and test the core bit of our hypothesis, which is that people would be prepared to connect with strangers to share food.
Yes.
And we thought, how do we prove that without building an app? I know, we will create a WhatsApp group and we will invite 12 people who did the market research survey, who are all physically paying throwing away good food. They all lived near each other, but didn't know each other and didn't know us. So we organised this all via email. And we said, hi there, this is going to sound a bit weird, but would you be interested in taking part in this 2-week experiment? We're going to put you all onto a WhatsApp group. And if anyone has any surplus food, then there might be some other people on this group who would be interested in taking it off your hands.
Yes.
And over that 2-week period, we actually had quite a lot of sharing happen via the WhatsApp group. So strangers connecting in real life on the doorstep to share food. So we were able to prove that hypothesis without spending a penny building any technology ourselves. That did then give us the confidence to say, right, now we are going to invest in building an app.
Yeah.
So that was the first kind of proof point. Then there was several proof points after launch. So when we launched Olio, we had that real chicken and egg problem. Do you get the people adding the listings, or do you get the demand? Which do you get in which order?
Yes.
It was super clear to us, as I've subsequently learned is the case for most marketplaces, which is actually supply comes first. So we invited those 12 people who took part in that proof of concept WhatsApp experiment. If they would, the day before we made the app available, we let them know. They decluttered their kitchen cupboards and they uploaded all of their spare onto the app. So that then meant that on launch day, when we sent an email out to about 2,000 people that we'd gathered email addresses of very manually, we stood on street corners for a whole summer collecting email addresses of people in that community who might be interested in our crazy app. And we sent them to the app. And our first few shares were what we called sort of ambassador to ambassador, i.e. those 12 people were sharing amongst each other via the app. Then we had our first share, which was a stranger to an ambassador. And then the magic moment, we had 2 total random strangers who had met via an app connecting in real life to share something. So that was really all the proof and validation we needed. The next kind of proof point, we then had a bit of a trough of despair because we fairly quickly learned that our early adopters absolutely loved Olio. They thought it was amazing, they thought it was brilliant because they hated food waste. But because they hated food waste, they didn't generate any food waste. Therefore, they had nothing to give away. Yeah. And then we had invited a couple of local bakeries and delis, etc., to use the app in the hope that they would add their unsold food at the end of the day to bring traffic into the store. And unfortunately, they didn't use the app either because they were too busy running their day-to-day operations to be messing around messaging with members of the community via an app.
Yeah.
So we were a food sharing app with no food, which was pretty useless. And how we solved that was we said, why don't we take the people who've got lots of spare time but no surplus food and match them up with the businesses that have no spare time and lots of surplus food. And that's our Food Waste Heroes program.
Yes.
So today we have 135,000 volunteers. They collect unsold food from local businesses. They take it home, add it to the app, and then the neighbours can request it and pop round and pick it up. We started super small with that, so just with 1 or 2 local corner stores. Then I remember getting Planet Organic in London on board was a really big win. It was like a brand name. I think they had 7 stores at the time. Then the really big win was getting Pret a Manger on board with over 100 stores. And then several years later, it all took us a lot longer than we had thought or hoped. We secured their big kahuna, which was Tesco.
Yeah.
And it took us, I think, 3.5 years to sign up Tesco. But then in 3 months, they wanted us to roll out across their whole portfolio of 2,700 stores. So again, that was definitely a massive moment of validation for us.
Domino effect.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, did the other big stores follow?
You would like to think so, wouldn't you? That's what we had thought. Once we got Tesco, everyone else is going to realise that this is the future of grocery and retail. No, sadly not. It took us another 4 years to sign up some of the other very large retailers.
Yes.
So one thing I've definitely learned on this journey is that these massive enterprises, the business development sales cycle can take many years, and there is nothing you can do as a small startup to change their strategy or accelerate their strategy. They will do what they want to do when they're ready to do it.
Yeah.
Your number one objective is to make sure that when they're ready to do it, they know who you are, they understand what you're doing, and you're top of mind, so that they don't forget about you when they finally decide to solve the problem that you help them solve.
Which requires a lot of grit and resilience.
It does.
And to keep the business
going
and
alive.
running in the meantime until you get there.
Yeah.
So that covered many of the things that I was going to ask in terms of like unexpected challenges that came. Was there anything else that surprised you in terms of sort of those bumps in the road, things that you expected would work that didn't?
I'd say the core premise, really. I think we assumed that, there's this massive marketplace inefficiency. Households are throwing away £14 billion of perfectly good food every year. The reason why they're doing that is not because people love throwing away food, is because they don't have anyone to give that food to.
Yes.
And if we just launch a mobile app and make it super simple, easy and convenient so that people can give away their spare food, then we will experience Instagram style hockey stick growth. And what we learned is that life isn't quite as simple as that. And there are lots of factors at play, one of which is something that we call middle class problem, which is that a lot of people think, I don't want this, therefore no one will want this. Yeah. I wouldn't travel 5 minutes to pick up a head of broccoli, and they're overlooking the fact that actually there are many people in their local community who would. So the middle class problem is definitely a really big one. Most people, when they think about Olio, they assume that there's no demand for the food. Oh gosh, really? People go around and pick up other people's food? Yes. A typical food listing is requested within 20 minutes of being added to the app. So our number one challenge is not demand, like most people assume. It's actually supply. It's persuading people to take 10 seconds to add something to the app rather than to just lob it in the bin like they would normally.
And I have to say, one of the things that I read, again, I often read your posts on LinkedIn, was a story of, I think it was a lady who basically managed to have, I don't remember what food it was, but it made her day. She managed to have just a fantastic meal.
Yep.
And it's those stories that make you think it's minimal effort. So
minimal effort, maximum impact.
Yeah. But I get the fact that issue with people.
Yeah. I think the other challenge that we also experienced is that for too many people in this country, food is too cheap. Don't get me wrong. For lots of people, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
But for too many people, it's too cheap. Therefore, why not throw it away? And also, I think a lot of people, because food is it's natural, it's organic, it comes from the ground, the sense of it being thrown away it's not like throwing away a plastic bottle, which we would all realize, that's very bad, that's very polluting. Or a lot of people say, I compost my food. And that's fantastic. Well done you. That is a million times better than putting it in the rubbish bin. But actually, 80% of all the greenhouse gas emissions, if not more, that are associated with that food took place prior to it getting to your house. So you putting it in the compost bin versus the rubbish bin is definitely better. But actually, in the schema of things, to really prevent the massive negative impact of food waste, we need to make sure that food is being eaten, not discarded in any way, shape or form. So that's another challenge for us.
It's so interesting because as we're talking, I then start to think about there is a huge mass education for us, the common folk, to really understand the implications of what we are and we're not doing.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of that. So a statistic that really blew my mind and I think really hammers this home pretty powerfully is that the greenhouse gas emissions from 1 kilogram of food waste, so let's imagine that food waste caddy, is equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions from landfilling 25,000 plastic bottles.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you're throwing away that head of broccoli that's looking a bit sad and limp, you're not just chucking away a head of broccoli, you're having an equivalent environmental impact of throwing several thousand plastic bottles into landfill. And so I think we've just really got to reshape how we think about food. And an apple or an orange, for example, isn't just an apple or orange, it's 70, 80, 100 plus litres of water went into producing that item of food. Never mind all the labor and fertilizers and fossil fuels that we use to farm it and grow it and refrigerate it and distribute it and manufacture it and all that kind of stuff.
It's getting back to grassroots as well. It's such a big problem. You look at the education system and you start to unwrap it all and trying to get it into the political side of it, etc., etc. So thank you for sharing that in terms of the Olio idea and some of the bumps and successes, challenges. Moving in now in terms of at the heart of the beating heart of the business, so building a team.
Yeah.
So you've built a business that's always been remote first, is my understanding from your inception.
Yeah.
How has that decision, firstly, what made you make that decision, and how has that influenced your ability to attract and retain talent into the business as you've scaled?
Yeah, so Sasha and I both lived in different places. We both had young children. So I had a newborn baby and a toddler. Sasha had a toddler at the time that we founded Olio. So we didn't have the time or the money to be commuting to an office that neither of us wanted to be in.
Yeah.
So it was very clear from day one that we had to find a way to work together without a physical location. We did that extremely successfully for the first year of Olio. And so it was then just very natural to us when in the second year we started to recruit. We still did not want an office.
Yeah.
We also found that we could or knew that we would be able to access talent that would be less expensive if it was outside of London. And being very cost conscious, as we always have been, that was just an obvious choice. So that was the original driver. I guess it was our personal perspective plus just being cost conscious.
Yeah.
As we then started to scale Olio and the team, we very quickly learned that an absolute superpower of being a remote first business is your ability to attract truly diverse talent. The minute you remove the constraints of you have to commute into an office in central London or wherever it is, boom, suddenly you can access all this diverse talent. So all these other businesses that honestly sort of lament a lot about how hard it is to recruit for diverse talent, I'm like, maybe if you had a remote first or approach, you might experience things differently. So we, across pretty much every single metric you can measure, we have an extremely diverse team. And that's really important to us because inclusive is our number one company value. We want millions, hundreds of millions, billions even of people to be using Olio. We recognize that the best products are built by diverse teams.
Yes.
So that has just been a fantastic advantage to us. And there's so much overlooked talent as well. And in particular, I have learned that the modern office experience has been designed by extroverts for extroverts, and roughly half the population is not extroverted. And so actually they're being asked to work in an environment that is just not at all productive for them. We have just found brilliant upsides through being a remote first business. We recognize it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So when we're recruiting, we really do screen for people who are not, I don't mind being remote first. We are screening for people who say, this is what is required for me to be happiest, most fulfilled, most productive.
Yeah.
And then that is just a dream come true for them and for us. But it's funny though, because the culture in which we operate has been a massive journey. So pre-COVID, we were a remote first business. We just met so much cynicism, so much disbelief from people that we gave up trying to convince and persuade people that this worked. And it just became a little bit of our dirty little secret. When people asked about an office, we'd just change the topic of conversation.
It's funny, isn't it?
Hope they hadn't noticed that we'd done that.
You're not successful back in the day unless you had a big office.
No, exactly. But now in a post-COVID world, people are like, oh, okay, I get that. So we're massive exponents of remote first. We have continued to iterate on the model though. So we do bring the team together 4 times a year.
Yeah.
So we have a Christmas party, we have a summer party. In the spring, we have functional offsites, which kind of 2-night overnight stay within your functions. And then the big flagship event is our annual retreat in the fall, which is just incredibly magical, incredibly special. It energizes people. Honestly, I'd say for at least 11 months.
Fantastic.
And again, it's something that makes working at Olio very special. So we do invest heavily into those face-to-face opportunities. We make them all about bonding and interpersonal stuff rather than trying to do work as such.
Yes.
And then we do use a fabulous tool called Hubble, which gives our team members access to credits that they can then redeem at a local co-working space near them.
Yeah.
So perhaps for some of the younger team members or people who live in a housing environment where it just isn't particularly conducive for them
Yes.
to be working from home, then they've got the flexibility to access co-working locations.
Fantastic. So again, I think you're one step ahead of me all the time as you're answering these questions. So for me, Olio seems to be, you've mentioned that your team reports it as their best job ever. So you clearly have consciously created a culture where you're hiring people that will thrive in the environment. Tell us some more. How are you succeeding at that? Because that has to be an aspirational goal for anyone leading a business.
Yeah. So I consider that we're building two products, if you like, for want of a better word. One product is the product that our end users use, and we spend an awful lot of time working on that. And then the second sort of product that we're building is our company and our company culture. And we think very deeply and carefully about that. And for me, it all starts at recruitment. And if you get the right people on the ship, then everything else becomes relatively plain sailing, not totally plain sailing, but a heck of a lot easier. And what we do through recruitment, there are a couple of things. So first of all, we have a very clear mission, and everyone who wants to come and work at Olio must be not just mission aligned, they must be mission obsessed.
Yeah.
And that is a significant tick above mission alignment. And we know how to figure out the people who are truly mission obsessed. They can't help but reveal themselves. The second thing is we lean very heavily on our company values. We only have 4, so no one has any excuse to not be able to remember them. They are inclusive, resourceful, caring, and ambitious.
Yeah.
And we, through the recruitment process, everybody does a final presentation. And as part of the final presentation, you have to present against how you embody each of those 4 values. And you can draw examples from your professional life and from your personal life. And it's really interesting because you can see some people really struggling to come up with credible examples of actually how they embody that value. So that works very well as well. And then, so you've got to bring the right people in, and then you've just got to keep continually course correcting. So we make sure that our values are a core part of our 360 feedback process, which we do twice a year. So everybody has to rate everyone they're given feedback on in terms of how well they live up to each of our 4 values. We then also do an employee satisfaction survey. And again, when we're assessing ourselves as an organization and how well we perform, we also rate ourselves against our values. And then when it comes to decision making and how we approach our operations, we lean very heavily on our values. And an example from this week would be we're really immersing ourselves in AI, figuring out how to unlock it and harness it in a way that is consistent with our mission and our values. And we're leaning very heavily on 2 of our values, 1, ambition, but 2, resourceful, because we recognize that there is an environmental footprint from AI. So we don't want to be profligate in terms of how we use it.
Fantastic. I love it. So moving on from culture, what about raising funds, particularly as a female? No matter where we read it. And again, you've mentioned fundraising being particularly difficult as a female founder. That may well specifically be because it's a tech for good startup. But I think generally women get a tiny pot of what's out there. I am genuinely interested in your views on why that's the case.
Yeah. So fundraising is brutal, especially for a female co-founded business. And you could argue whether that's my experience or not, but let's just let the data speak for itself. So just 2% of all venture capital investment goes to female co-founded businesses, 85% goes to male founded businesses, and the delta goes to mixed teams. And even if you look at the sort of deal flow that is coming into VCs, the reality is we have to be roughly kind of 10 times better than the guys to get the money. So the odds are very firmly stacked against you as a female founder. That infuriates me because I see female founders disproportionately focusing their lives on solving society's biggest problems. And by underfunding women and diverse founders of all types, I should say, founders of color have exactly the same experience. We are underinvested. By underinvesting in these people, we are underinvesting in solving society's biggest problems. And that's deeply concerning. In terms of why this is, my personal perspective is that it is because only 10% of check writing investors are female. And as long as the gatekeepers of capital are not at all representative of the founders that are seeking investment, then the diverse founders are going to continue to be underinvested in. And this is a problem that is not going to get solved by office hours or any more mentoring. We need the money. And in my ideal world, the investment companies would be disclosing the gender diversity of their investment committees, so not of their employed professionals, but their investment committees, and they'd be setting themselves targets to get towards gender representative investment committees. Now, in recent years, many investment organizations have made good strides in terms of bringing in junior female professionals, but unfortunately, we're now seeing loads of them quitting in their droves, and I think for us, it's also been a very frustrating experience because when we pitch to these junior female investment managers, they immediately get what we are doing. They get very excited about the business. We then spend a long time with them. We then end up pitching to the investment committee, and then we still get the no. And so actually, ironically, this is almost wasting more of our time. And we're still not having the money. And it's also deeply disheartening for the female investors when they are putting all their energy into trying to make these investments and then just getting knocked back when they hit the investment committee. So we've really got to change the composition of the investment committees.
So again, that theme of being damned resilient. And as you say, fundraising is brutal to start off with. But two female founders being able to persevere.
Yeah, you have to persevere, but also you've got a few other things that I would recommend. Just acknowledge that the odds are very much stacked against you. Recognize that the no's just come with the territory. So don't take it as a personal no. It just is what it is. Then I would also recommend that you acknowledge that there are a ton of both conscious and unconscious biases against you. And those biases generally fall into two buckets. They think that as female and diverse founders that we are not ambitious, and they think that we are not commercial. So given that is the assumption that is being made about you, make sure you dress like someone who looks like they're an ambitious commercial person when you show up. Make sure you conduct yourself with your body language in such a way that you convince them that you're ambitious and commercial. Make sure that in your deck you have the ambitious and commercial stuff at the beginning rather than leaving it to the end. So I can't remember which round it was, just thinking we've got to somehow get these investors to take us seriously because they kept on talking about you girls with your little project. And so the first slide of our deck, I changed it so that it had both of our names and it had all these kind of seals of approval that we had got from other institutions that these investors would recognize and respect. And that really helped to make them sit up and listen to us properly at the beginning of the pitch. And then the other thing I always recommend is to listen to an incredible TED talk by Dana Kanzi, who is a university professor who analyzed why is it that female founders aren't getting the investment they want. And she looked specifically at the pitch process, and she found that female founders are asked what she refers to as prevention questions, which is all about the downside, what could go wrong, what happens if Facebook and Google come in and compete with you. And the male founders are asked what she called promotion questions, all about the upside. How fast can you grow? What would happen if I gave you a couple of extra million? And the solution to that challenge is to take those prevention questions, to turn them around and to answer them with a promotion response.
Interesting. That's a fantastic share there for anyone listening. Thank you for that. Moving on to you on the sort of the leadership evolution now.
Yeah.
As you've grown the team, how have you balanced the need to have individuals in your business? So as you go from startup to scale up, in general, you go from roles that have got generalists, as I would call them, and they're spinning many plates as one individual. So balancing that with being agile and then starting to get more specialized roles. So as the roles have evolved, as you've grown, how do you balance that and stay agile?
So that's definitely something that every organization goes through as you scale, that move from the generalists to the specialists. It can be extremely painful because unfortunately it means that some of your earliest team members need to part ways with you as an organization because you're just no longer able to bring out the best in them. So that is emotionally very tough and you have lots of very difficult conversations.
Yeah.
But it's something that you have to do. It comes with the territory. I think what is very interesting is as a founder, if you're a first-time founder, you've never done what you've done before, but people who are doing their jobs have generally done what they've done lots of times. And so it can result in you doubting yourself as a founder when you have these increasingly highly paid professional people who are experts in their domain telling you that this is how it should be done and this is right and that is wrong. And yet sometimes your gut and your instinct is to say, no, that just doesn't feel right for my business. That's wrong. And then you then get caught in this really angsty situation where you're like, I'm paying a fortune for these specialized people who are telling me this, but it feels like it's totally wrong. And they're telling me I need to empower them and I shouldn't be spending all this money if I don't empower them. So I should empower them, but it just doesn't sit right with me. And I think many founders can relate to that experience. And I think my core learning from that really is to listen to your gut and listen to your instinct. I think too often we might, maybe if it just, you just feel a bit insecure and you override the red flags that you've got going on inside. And of course we should listen to experts. Of course we should be flexible and adaptive in our thinking. But at the end of the day, if you've got these kind of red flags or alarm bells going off inside you need to really listen to them.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. I always say fill that doubt with data. If your tummy's telling you something, listen to it and then gather more information. So we're starting to get to the end now. So I want to move on to lessons for listeners. So what lessons have you learned about building and scaling a community platform that other founders might benefit from?
So building a community is something that lots of founders want to do, but only very few businesses, I'd say, are actually well suited to being able to create a community. It's a bit like we all want a viral video, right? But only a very few videos truly become viral. Same with community, right? You've got to have a product or a service that people are absolutely obsessed by, or your mission they're obsessed by. And it also has to be something that they can really frequently engage in and engage with themselves. So if you are a product that is only used once or twice a year, it can be really hard to get that degree of community going and obsession. And also you need to recognize that building a community is a real double-edged sword. So there's loads of positives in terms of the feedback loops that you get to enable you to improve what you're doing, in terms of customer acquisition. So for example, for us, we have about 70,000 people joining Olio each month. 60% of them are coming to us through word of mouth, and almost all of the remainder are coming to us organically. So that's fantastic. That's a direct output of the community. But then there are some real downsides to that, in that the community feels like Olio is theirs. And so they really are incredibly demanding of us. They hold our feet to the fire. And because they don't have the full picture, they can often be furious with us about the fact that we haven't fixed this or that we've taken this decision. And that can be really emotionally challenging. So I've definitely had to develop a much thicker skin than I had before, that's for sure.
And you touched on it before, you place a strong emphasis on diversity inclusion.
Yeah.
Can you share some specific ways this commitment has shaped your hiring practices and team dynamics as you've scaled? You talked a little bit about hiring first, but if you're putting diversity inclusion at the forefront, how do you embed that into what you do?
For me, it really does. It does start with the hiring. So inclusive is our number one company value.
Yeah.
And we've also got caring as our third company value. So that means that we work hard to bring in people who are diverse, or if they're not perhaps considered diverse, they are people who in their DNA reach out to others and show up in a very inclusive way. So honestly, I'd say that's 90% of the hard lifting done.
Yeah.
But I do think of inclusivity is a degree further on than diversity, right? Mm-hmm. And we've definitely had challenging conversations in an organization. For example, when we are looking to move into markets or countries that perhaps have cultural norms or religious norms or values that are quite different than ours, that are quite upsetting or offensive to some of our very diverse team members, we've had to have difficult conversations about sort of what comes first. Is it this company value or our mission? Now, we were very clear that the mission comes first.
Yes.
We acknowledge that if we want to solve the problem we're trying to solve at scale, we acknowledge that we're going to have to work in places that we don't necessarily agree with their worldview.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to show up there. But then we need to do the hard work to figure out how do we make sure that our diverse team members feel like they can participate in those opportunities? How do we think about career development? How do we think about the norms that we put in place? If we're going to recruit from those countries, how do we make sure that we protect the diversity of our culture? And there aren't necessarily any simple answers, but we do have policies and processes in place. But most importantly, we're just having the conversation and we're just listening to people's feedback. So when team members tell us that they feel scared or afraid or concerned, or they're worried about their physical safety if they were to go somewhere, we've just got to work through all of that detail. But something that I think is quite overlooked in the whole diversity field is diversity of thought. And so this, in our latest employee satisfaction survey, not an employee satisfaction survey, in our diversity and socioeconomic survey, we inserted a couple of questions this year for the first time around diversity of thought, which was really trying to understand if people feel like they can show up authentically with their thoughts and opinions, and that their thoughts and opinions will be properly listened to. And I was mightily relieved to see that we've got fantastic sort of results on that. But again, just some really helpful feedback. So.
Yeah, psychological safety is I don't know whether it's a hot topic still, but for some time it was. And I think it takes quite a lot for people to authentically show up and feel like they can contribute. All credit for getting that kind of feedback. I think it's vital. So looking ahead now for Olio, with your goal of reaching 1 billion users, hopefully I've got that statistic right, by 2030.
We can dream, yes.
Well, you've got to have a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Exactly.
And what do you see as some of the biggest obstacles and opportunities to achieve that ambitious goal?
So I'd say one of the biggest obstacles is the global rollback on the importance of sustainability that's happening right now.
Yes.
So it is very difficult for us. We're selling services into businesses saying that we're going to tackle their food waste problem. And it can be extremely challenging to be told that sustainability is just no longer important for us. Solving this problem is no longer important. So that just makes the sales cycles longer and harder.
And are you genuinely getting that pushback now?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. So back in 2020 and 2021, sustainability was a top 3 or top 5 strategic priority for certainly all the business we were talking to. Now it's lucky if it's in the top 10. That is the reality of the world in which we're operating. So how we're responding to that actually is to really change our pitch and not be talking actually about solving food waste, but be talking more about helping businesses to unlock more revenues by helping them sell more of their food, and then talking about feeding communities via the redistribution of their unsold food, and actually not talk about greenhouse gas emissions and all that kind of stuff. So that's definitely a major barrier. And then just the consumer behavior piece. I think too many people think that what I do doesn't count. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. I would point people to look at TikTok and look at how that has emerged from nothing to billions of users in just a couple of years. So what you do does count, but a lot of people have been dissuaded from that. So we just need to continue to bang the drum, help to raise education around the problems that we're solving as well.
I think that's a big one, education. Some of the stats that you were talking about earlier, for me, that some of them are jaw-dropping.
They are, and I can't believe that they're not on the front page of every newspaper, but they're not, unfortunately.
I find it incredibly sad. And even to your point then about businesses, as somebody who doesn't spend as much time from a work perspective in the ecosystem that you do, there's obviously rhetoric that people talk about PR and talking about it's not a hot topic anymore. I feel sad that actually that is the reality.
Meanwhile, we can all look outside our windows and see that the climate crisis is very much real, very much happening, and we desperately need to be taking action.
So just one final question. So what is one myth about scaling a business that you would like to bust?
I've been guilty of this myself, and I think most founders are. We tend to think that, when I achieve X, I will be happy. When I raise my Series A, when I get to 1 million in revenues, when I launch in this country. And the reality is that entrepreneurship is just a series of false summits. So you need to make sure that you really enjoy the mountaineering.
And I guess it would be remiss of me not to ask a question on the back of that.
Go on then.
Are there any tools, frameworks that you use that help you to adopt that? This is a milestone. I'm going to sit with this. Anything that you can share?
Certainly as a leader, because you have more visibility about when milestones are happening, you've often got your head around that and you're already on to the next thing by the time the milestone actually does happen. And so it's really important to have the discipline to say, I'm going to have an organizational pause to celebrate this milestone, and just allow a little bit of breathing space around the milestone, because you're constantly 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, and the team do need to celebrate those wins along the way, even if you realize that you've got a big struggle ahead still.
And on a personal level, you've obviously got to juggle life, family, work. Anything that for me personally, where I'm getting at is mindfulness is one for me that helps me calibrate. Is there anything that you use that works?
There's a lot of stuff. So I read a book years ago called The Lean Startup, which is actually all about how to be iterative, agile with regards to how you build your business. And I applied that methodology to my life, to my own well-being, my own mental health, which is just experiment and find what works for you. What I think the sort of major learning that I've had is that it is absolutely crucial that I am mentally, physically, spiritually strong. And if I'm not, then the business is going nowhere. So the single most important thing I can actually do for this business is to make sure that I am showing up in the best version of myself each day. And for me, what is crucial is that I do get a proper night's sleep, and then I must exercise. And so for me, I don't try not to schedule any meetings before 10 o'clock in the morning, because I do the school run and all that stuff. And then I'm doing my exercise. Now, that's also when I'm doing my highest quality thinking. That is when I have all of my creative breakthroughs. And I've now gone from feeling guilty about that time to recognizing that this is the single highest ROI time in my day, and I need to protect it fiercely.
Yes, I absolutely went through the same myself. It was like, okay, have I got time to walk the dog? Have I got time to do a run? Have I got time to this? Because then I need to start work, without that realization that says I've already started. That's it for this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered. And if you got value from today's conversation, hit the subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us bring more real conversations your way. If you've got a scale-up challenge, a story to share, want to ask a question, or even recommend someone that I might interview, take a look at the link to our website in the description below. pop in a message to me via the email listed in the description. But until the next time, keep scaling, keep learning, and remember, you're not alone on your scaling journey.